There are truths that don't just hurt. They tear the soul apart. Truths that once revealed offer no way back. Truths that destroy the fantasies you grew up with, those you were taught to call love. But it is precisely those truths that have the power to rip you from the lie, to shatter the spell that kept you walking through life half asleep. And among all of them, there's one that most men refuse to face. Women don't love the way you love, they never have. And as long as you don't understand this, you'll remain trapped in a cycle of unreciprocated giving, blind idealization, and repeated pain. You're not suffering because of her. You're suffering because you're clinging to a mental construction that was never real. What hurts is the fantasy, not the person. What crushes you is realizing that everything you thought was mutual was in fact just a projection. Schopenhauer, the philosopher many called a pessimist, was one of the few who dared to say it bluntly. He dismantled the romantic ideal with a pen that never asked permission to offend. According to him, what we call romantic love is nothing more than a trick of the species, a mechanism carefully designed to keep the man distracted, committed, devoted, but never truly reciprocated in the way he hopes. What you call a soulmate, she might call stability. What you see as eternal, she may view as merely functional, and not because she's evil, because she's programmed just as you are, but from a different logic. And that mismatch between your idealism and her biology is the root of your suffering. This isn't about blaming. It's not about hating. It's about seeing, about opening your eyes to a pattern that repeats itself in the lives of millions of men who gave everything and received only silence. Not because they weren't enough, but because they never understood the rules of the game. A game where you offer your soul expecting eternity, while she only responds to a silent, ancient, efficient impulse, and when that impulse stops activating, you stop mattering. Schopenhauer didn't speak out of resentment. He spoke out of clarity. What he saw in the dynamic between man and woman was a system of unconscious forces, where romantic love is merely decorative surface behind every promise of forever, behind every gesture you interpret as deep connection. A biological logic is at work, one that doesn't ask for permission, and that logic is cold. Strategic functional for her, love is not a sacred destination. It's a means, an instrument of selection, while you believe you're living an epic story of souls finding one another. She often, without conscious awareness, is evaluating whether you meet her current needs. Status, security, provision, protection, not out of malice, but by design. Her instinct is not calibrated to idealize, but to survive. And when someone appears who represents a better option on that silent board, her body knows before her mind does. The spark dies, and you're left confused, thinking, love disappeared out of nowhere. But love was never what you thought it was. That disconnection. You can't explain logically that sudden coldness. You don't know the origin of. It's not betrayal in the way you understand it. It's biological adaptation. It's evolution. You're still anchored to the narrative you were sold. If you love purely, you'll be loved in return. But she doesn't respond to purity. She responds to functionality. And if you stop being useful in that emotional, economic, or social structure, you stop being chosen. You stop being needed. The mistake isn't in her for changing direction. The mistake is in you for not realizing. You were playing an emotional game with biological rules for continuing to give your soul to a system that only needed a part of you. For a limited time, you placed your heart where only presence was required. You gave eternity where only a temporary advantage was expected. And while you still believed in the story, she was already looking toward another horizon, not out of cruelty, but because her instinct had stopped choosing you. Since childhood, we've been programmed with a powerful and dangerous idea that finding the right woman would give our entire existence meaning, that she would be the end of the road, the reward, the cure for our loneliness. the refuge where we could finally rest from the world. They told us that if we loved deeply enough, if we were loyal, noble, and persistent, we would receive equally pure love in return. That being good men was enough, that devotion was sacred, that sacrifice was love. But no one told us she wasn't dreaming the same dream. No one warned us that her logic does not respond to romantic depth, but to instinctual need, while you were pouring yourself into building something eternal. She might have just been crossing a bridge. You laid the foundations of a castle in her honor, unaware that she was only looking for a temporary shelter. The total devotion you offered wasn't seen as an act of greatness. It was often perceived as a sign of weakness, because to the female, instinct security isn't found in devotion, but in strength. And if your love makes you lose your center, your power, your dignity, then you become less desirable, less useful, less necessary. Men believe the more they give, the more they will be loved. But they fail to see that unconditional giving often communicates only one thing, that they're willing to abandon themselves. And that far from inspiring connection breeds disinterest, because in this hidden game of biology and selection, value is not in how much you sacrifice. It's in how much you can lead without losing yourself, without crawling, without disappearing. And when she leaves, when silence replaces promises, the man doesn't just lose a woman. He loses a part of himself because he made that story. His identity because he believed his worth was tied to being chosen. But Schopenhauer said it without flinching. What you feel as eternal love may be for her just an episode, you confuse it with destiny, when for her it was just circumstance. The most devastating moment is not when she leaves. It's when you, standing in front of the mirror, realize that everything you gave didn't change a thing, that your messages, your gestures, your sacrifices didn't mean the same to her, that while you were building an emotional home, she was constructing an unconscious survival strategy. And that abyss of meaning is what breaks you, because you thought you both loved from the same place, from the same longing for transcendent connection. But no, you gave your soul. She evaluated conditions, and there you are, shattered, pleading with your heart for something she had already resolved with her instinct. There's no going back. No speech can reignite a flame that only burned, because you served a function. When you're no longer useful, you're no longer desired. And while you beg, she no longer feels. While you replay memories, she's already projecting herself toward what's next. Her instinctive radar isn't waiting for your understanding. It just operates. And here comes the cruelest part. The more you beg, the more you dissolve. The harder you try to prove you're worth it, the less you're worth in her eyes, because the man who gives everything without boundaries, without demands, without limits, ends up as an emotional disposable object. Not because she planned it that way, but because instinct doesn't reward powerless. Giving it rewards dominance, direction, self-control. And when you lose yourself in the desperation to get her back, you lose the one thing that once made you valuable. Your dignity. You become the echo of an illusion that never understood the ground it was playing on. Schopenhauer warned us without embellishment, the man who places a woman at the center of his existence becomes a slave not to her, but to the image he projected onto her. And when that image shatters, there's nothing solid left to rebuild from, only ruins, only silence. But within that devastation, there is a door, and the key isn't in her, it's in you. The key is this: I allowed it, not as an act of guilt, but as a point of origin. If you allowed the idealization, the blind devotion, the self-abandonment, then you can also allow your reconstruction. You can stop looking outward toward her and begin to look inward, not as a man who needs to be loved to feel complete, but as one who finally understands his own worth. Beyond any external validation that doesn't mean becoming cold or hateful or closed off to love. It means waking up, seeing clearly, understanding that a woman is neither a goddess nor a demon, but a being with a different logic, that her primary impulse is to select, evaluate, and move forward according to what her biology dictates, not your idealism. And now that you are aware of this, you have the power to choose who you share your energy with, because you are no longer trying to be chosen. You are choosing when you stop idealizing something stronger than illusion is born. Clarity. A clarity that tells you your worth isn't measured by how much you give or how unconditionally you love, but by how loyal you remain to yourself even in the face of desire, and that clarity changes you. It returns the dignity you had placed in her hands. You become selective not from arrogance, but from deep respect for your essence. Schopenhauer didn't want men to become cynics. He wanted them to stop suffering from playing a game whose rules they didn't understand. He wanted them to awaken to stop seeking transcendence in others that can only be built from within, to stop sacrificing their purpose for a promise that was never made from the same place. Because when the veil drops, when the illusion dies, something powerful is born. The man who doesn't beg for love, who doesn't plead to be seen, who doesn't trade his soul for scraps of affection. The man who chooses himself every single day. And that is the only man who is truly free.